I swear, I'm not going for a theme here. I've just happened across some story-centric pointy clicks recently, with a female protagonist and hints of supernatural elements and the viewing of adult problems from the perspective of someone younger and the low price point and the 1 to 2 hour length, but honestly, total coincidence. Grey Skies Dark Waters was kickstarted back in 2015 for a mere $2,404. Even if the game was half built by that point, as the campaign claimed, that is a tiny, tiny budget to pay for original music, voice acting and numerous bird consultants. I'm not making that last part up, by the way, they're in the credits. They can't seem to spell grey correctly though. Surprisingly common mistake that. Don't know what's going on there. So while some of my criticisms will sound harsh, I want to acknowledge that the dev team have managed to do quite a lot with an amount that a AAA game studio would have used up in half an hour. If that. One more thing, the game's plot is a modern retelling of an old folktale, but if I tell you what tale it retells, I'll kinda spoil the plot. The Steam description doesn't have this out in the open thankfully, but the Kickstarter page does. Understandable, since they would want to let potential backers know what kind of game they were going for, but do watch out for that if you're planning on playing this yourself but want to research first. Story! That's rather important for a story-centric game, isn't it? Vivian Garrett went missing a year ago. No notes, no explanation, no signs of trouble or distress. She seemingly vanished into thin air one day and never returned. Her husband Robert was arrested after he had a breakdown at work, but no charges were ever brought forward. With Robert in the clear, his 4 children returned from living with their uncles and are back in their old house. It's now a year to the day since Vivian's disappearance, with no further explanation having been uncovered. And who the fuck are you? Okay, you can guess this is your main character, and she's one of the aforementioned children. You'll find out which one as soon as she says some dialogue, her name's right there and all. It's Lena, for the benefit of anyone who's looking away from the video right now. That transition from story to gameplay felt rather awkward though. No concrete setup or even a stated goal, you're plonked into a kitchen and that's it. Again, an educated guess would say you're going to find out what happened to the main character's mother, since the intro talks about that pretty extensively, but a single line of dialogue to that effect would work wonders, I think. At this point we find out the interface is one button, left click to interact. Actually it's technically 2 buttons, since the fast travel and to-do list are hidden in a menu which you access by the escape key. I'll come back to that last part later, but these controls work fine for me. I didn't even miss the lack of an examine option. Perhaps because that's normally more of an issue for inventory items and this game doesn't have one. Okay, Lena does have an inventory, but not a traditional one. You do pick up items, you do use them later, you just can't see or access those items directly once you've grabbed them. I went back and forth on this issue for a while and ultimately decided you should at least be able to see the inventory. Whilst I wouldn't call the tasks in this game brain teasers by any stretch, remembering what you have in your pockets would be helpful. Especially if, say, someone puts the game down for a while, picks it back up later, has no idea what they're carrying and doesn't know how to progress. Arguably this isn't a big concern for a 2-hour game, and even then it's a job that can also be handled by the to-do list, with the added bonus that the list entry will probably remind you of what you're meant to do with the item. But to me that feels like a workaround. It's what I like to call a programmer solution. Like they've shoved it in wherever they could rather than crafted a proper place for it. It's not as if the game is adverse to putting icons on the screen, but these are special items you'll interact with in some way rather than use somewhere else. A mobile phone for example, or a set of documents you might want to reread. So why not a wee inventory icon? I'm glad the to-do list is there, whatever form it takes. I like reminders of stuff I'm meant to do, and I like checking things off a list because it makes me feel like an accomplished adult or some shit. It's not quite the notebook from the Blackwell games, but it reminds me enough to mention it out loud. Nothing more than that, but there you go. While we're on the interface, damned if I'm not getting a Life is Strange vibe with this font choice. Or Grim Fandango with the 3D models on 2D backgrounds, or any number of games I could name drop here if they hadn't beat me to it on the Steam page. It's like they want these videos to be shorter or something. Also, Resident Evil 2, really? Love the game, but it feels like a weird thing to reference. Mind you, whatever the font choice, they at least changed it from the default Unity font. Pretty sure Broken Sword 5 forgot about that one. Then we have the graphics, which, well, they look odd. 3D models on 2D backgrounds can be done, but these don't match up. I think this change was made quite late in development too, presumably it would have been 2D sprites on 2D backgrounds before then. The backgrounds are somewhere between a painting and a graphic novel, which I believe is entirely intentional, whereas the character models are comparatively realistic. I say comparatively because what is actually going on with the lighting on this model? Nothing. Nothing is going on, because there is no lighting. This is fine when the character stays still, like Dadman on the couch here looks really good. When a character has to move around, however, it's all the more obvious, and not merely because you can see those dead unmoving eyes. Lena's shadow is always directly beneath her for some reason, she'll sometimes pivot on the spot with no foot movement, that kind of thing. Worth noting that the Kickstarter campaign missed a stretch goal for improved graphics and models. That's a shame. And granted, I haven't looked into this, so I don't really know for sure, but I feel like Unity is an engine where implementing anti-aliasing would be a relatively easy thing to do. It should be set up for it. And these models could use it. They look quite jaggy sometimes. In fact, that's probably my biggest criticism of this game. The feelings I get from it vary between cheap, rushed, and unfinished. For one thing, the voiceover quality is inconsistent. Not the performance, the actual quality of the recording can jump noticeably between line reads. Also, I hope you like Echo because all of Lena's inner thoughts are spoken with one. I'm fine with it myself, but it could grate on you after a while. Both this and the graphics speak for themselves. Then there's other less obvious things like fast travel being implemented as a menu option. This will depend on the individual game design, but I tend to think in-universe features shouldn't be implemented in what is essentially a pause menu, or getting a full dialogue message when something is added to your to-do list with a helpful reminder of where the said to-do list is. Yet more features I would have added an icon for. Actually, the screen's getting pretty cluttered at this point. I'm not about to advocate for a pop-out menu, am I? 2014 me would kill me. The worst of my criticisms is a story-related one, not something a story-centric game would want. This is late in the game when a massive plot point is revealed. You read the thing, you see the plot point, and it doesn't elicit any reaction whatsoever from the main character. And without spoiling anything, it really bloody should. We're very much used to hearing what Lena's thinking by now, and this revelation would probably make her say those thoughts out loud using short words at terrifying volume. That's quite a shame compared to how well the rest of the story is told. Hearing and knowing so much about Lena's family means there's a distinct lack of stereotype to the characters here, which I appreciate. That said, Violet is clearly going through a goth phase, but that mostly just governs her look. And issues with audio quality aside, this wouldn't work half as well were it not for the voice actors doing a good job and the calm, wistful music setting the scenes. High marks for those. Throughout the game we hear a lot about Lena's childhood, the memories she has of her brother and sisters and the area she grew up in, how the past year has affected everyone, and there are various theories as to what really happened. You start getting an idea of who these characters are before you meet them. It's obvious a lot of effort went into making these characters, well, characters rather than dialogue dispensers. One last good point, the game has a few decisions which decide the plot. I think it might be these ones where you choose to tell the truth or lie. They only explicitly point it out the first time it happens. Not branching down different paths, although that happens to an extent too. More deciding what happened. The option you pick becomes true. A bit like that game you played once where you could never make the right decision because it turned out the guy was only evil with one choice and not the other, so you were always wrong and everything felt frozen and pointless. Except this time it's on purpose. And it actually works here because there isn't an objectively wrong answer. This will also lead Lena's personality down 3 distinct paths and potentially changes the ending of the game. One of the rare times that a short length works in a game's favour, rerunning it to see a new ending is far less of a problem if it doesn't take as long. Well done for allowing a degree of control of your protagonist's thoughts whilst still making her seem like a character in her own right. So, is this worth playing? Obviously it's more story based than puzzle based, but if that bothers you then you're not likely to still be watching. It's got a few problems which can make it seem less than stellar combined with the short playtime, but I feel like it has a price to match, £4.99 at the time of writing. What you'll get is not a personal experience story, but something both relatable and fantastical. If you fancy getting lost for a few hours, this could be worth a nosy.
Got arrested. It's still a little weird to be back here and not sharing a room with my cousin at Uncle Thomas's house. All Dad really needs is a toothbrush and a razor.